I'm Adam, 40M. I've never been the kind of guy who thrives on attention. Growing up in my family, it was safer not to. My parents, Richard and Elaine, had a very clear favorite. My younger sister, Lydia, 37F. From as far back as I can remember, she was the golden center of their world, while I was tolerated. When Lydia was in school, she'd come home with a scribbled drawing, and my mom would tack it on the fridge like it was a masterpiece. Dad would brag to the neighbors about how gifted she was. Meanwhile, I could bring home an actual award, something I'd worked my tail off for, and all I'd get was a pat on the back, and that's fine, Adam, but let's not make a fuss. You learn pretty quickly where you stand in a family like that. So, I stopped expecting much from them. I built my own life, kept my distance, and found happiness in small things. But turning 40, it hit me differently. Maybe because it felt like such a milestone, or maybe because deep down, I wanted, just once, to celebrate with family without being overshadowed by Lydia. So I decided to plan something simple but meaningful, a small dinner at a nice local restaurant. Nothing extravagant. I rented a private room, ordered a cake, and sent invitations out well in advance. I told myself, this year will be different. This year, they'll show up for me. A week after sending the invitations, my phone rang. It was Mom. I expected a quick question about directions or timing, but her tone was clipped, almost annoyed. Adam, she said, are you sure about this party? I was caught off guard. Sure about what? It's just a dinner. You know Lydia is very busy this week. She's planning something important. We don't want her to feel like you're competing. Competing. That word stuck in my head like a thorn. Competing with my own sister for attention on my birthday. I laughed it off, though it wasn't funny. Mom, it's my 40th birthday. I'm not competing with anyone. Her sigh came through the phone, heavy and disappointed, like I was a child making unreasonable demands. Well, just don't be surprised if not everyone can make it. Lydia has a lot on her plate. I hung up with a knot in my chest. Part of me wanted to cancel right then and there, just to avoid the inevitable disappointment. But another part, the stubborn part, refused. I thought, no, I deserve this one night. The day of the party arrived. I showed up early to the restaurant, nervous but excited. The room was set beautifully, the cake waiting on the side table, my friends trickling in with smiles and warm congratulations. For a while, I let myself believe it was going to be perfect. Then, one by one, I realized the family seats were still empty. My parents, my sister, even my cousin Ezra, who always managed to show up when Lydia was hosting something. Not a single one of them came. No text, no call, just silence. I forced myself to smile through it. My friends deserved that much. We ate, we laughed, and for a while, I even forgot about the empty chairs. But when it was time to blow out the candles, the sting came rushing back. Everyone gathered around, phones ready, the cake lit with its little row of flames. I leaned forward, made my wish, and blew them out. And right then, my phone lit up on the table beside me. A new message from Mom. We need to talk now. Before I could even process it, the missed call notifications started flashing. One after another. Not 2, not 5, 24 missed calls. All from her. That knot in my chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. I knew, instinctively, this wasn't about wishing me a happy birthday. No, with my family, nothing was ever that simple. The cake had barely been cut when I excused myself from the table to check my phone. My friends were still chatting, laughing, completely unaware of the storm that was building behind the glowing screen in my hand. The message sat there, stark and cold. We need to talk now. 24 missed calls stacked beneath it like an accusation. I just stared at it for a while, the fork in my hand hovering over the slice of cake on my plate. I didn't want to open it, didn't want to get dragged into whatever Lydia-centered drama this was. But I knew my mom. Ignoring her wasn't an option, not unless I wanted her to escalate. So, against my better judgment, I texted back, I'm at dinner. What's going on? The reply came instantly, like she'd been waiting, phone in hand. Why didn't you tell us you were still going through with that little party? My stomach dropped. That little party. I could hear her voice in those words, the disdain dripping from each syllable. I typed back slowly. I invited you weeks ago. You knew about it. This time, no text, she called again. The screen lit up with her name. My friends were mid-conversation, but I slipped out of the room into the hallway and answered. Her voice was sharp, impatient. Adam, what on earth were you thinking? I clenched my jaw. It's my birthday, Mom. I thought that was reason enough. You're being selfish, she shot back. Do you have any idea what Lydia's been dealing with this week? She's hosting a networking event tomorrow, Adam. A very important one. And you, she practically spat the word, decide to drag everyone's attention away the night before. I actually laughed, though it wasn't from humor. Drag attention away? Mom, I'm eating cake with a handful of friends. Lydia doesn't even live in this city. That's not the point, she snapped. The point is, you put her in an impossible position. She couldn't possibly come tonight without being exhausted tomorrow, and now she feels guilty. She thinks you did this deliberately. I froze in the empty hallway, the muffled sounds of my friend's laughter spilling from the private room behind me. Deliberately? Are you serious? You're saying I planned my 40th birthday just to sabotage Lydia's networking event? Don't raise your voice at me, Adam, she warned, her tone icy. You've always had this competitive streak, even if you pretend you don't. Lydia works so hard, and you should be supporting her, not trying to undermine her. Something inside me snapped then, not all the way, but enough to let the anger push past my usual silence. Supporting her? She's 37 years old, Mom. She doesn't need the entire family rearranging their lives every time she hosts a luncheon or gives a presentation. It's my birthday, one night, and not one of you could bother to show up. For a moment, all I heard was her breathing on the line. Then she said, coldly, "You don't understand what you've done." And she hung up. I stared at the screen, the call disconnected, my reflection ghosting across the black glass. My friends were calling me back in, telling me the cake was getting warm, but I couldn't move. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. What I didn't realize then, what I couldn't have realized, was that this was just the beginning. Because when I got home later that night, still carrying the leftover cake box under my arm, I found my phone buzzing again. A new group chat had been created: Mom, Dad, Lydia, Cousin Ezra, and me. The first message was from Dad. Adam, we need to sit down as a family. Tomorrow. No excuses. My first instinct was to ignore it. But then Lydia chimed in. You knew what this week meant to me, Adam. I cannot believe you'd pull something like this. You've embarrassed me in front of people who matter. Embarrassed her? At my birthday party? I stared at the screen, rereading it over and over, my hands tightening around the phone. Ezra, predictably, added his 2 cents. Honestly, Adam, you should have consulted Lydia before planning something like this. Everyone knows how much she's invested in her event. You made her look bad. I sat on the edge of my bed, the leftover cake untouched beside me, and for the first time in years, I let the full weight of their twisted logic hit me. I wasn't just invisible to them. I was a nuisance. A problem to be managed whenever I dared to exist outside the shadow they had cast over me. I didn't reply. Not that night. I put the phone face down, sat in the dark, and listened to the vibration of new messages piling up, one after another. Demands. Accusations. The next morning, though, I woke up to something new. My mom had sent me a calendar invite. A family meeting. At their house. The subject line read simply, addressing Adam's behavior. Behavior. That word sent a shiver down my spine. I was a grown man, 40 years old, and yet here they were, treating me like a child who had misbehaved. And still, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't show up, they'd use it against me. They always did. So I agreed. When I arrived at my parents' house the next evening, the first thing I noticed was Lydia's car parked proudly in the driveway. I hadn't seen it in years, but it still looked brand new, spotless. Mom always made sure she had the best. Inside, the living room had been arranged like some kind of tribunal. Dad sat stiffly in his armchair, Mom perched beside him, and Lydia lounged across the couch like a queen awaiting her subjects. Ezra sat close to her, grinning faintly, clearly enjoying the drama. Adam, Dad said, nodding as I entered. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp, appraising. We need to talk about what happened. I stayed standing, hands in my pockets. You mean my birthday? Don't be flippant, Mom said, her lips pressed tight. You created unnecessary tension for Lydia at a very critical time. We need to understand why you thought that was acceptable. I blinked at them, stunned. Why I thought celebrating my own birthday was acceptable. Are you listening to yourselves? Lydia gave a small, theatrical sigh. Adam, it's not about the birthday. It's about the way you went about it. No communication, no consideration. You blindsided me. My voice rose despite myself. Blindsided you? I sent invitations 3 weeks ago. Ezra leaned forward, smirking. You know Lydia doesn't have time to look at every little thing, Adam. You should have coordinated with her. That would have been the respectful thing to do. The word respectful rattled in my head, absurd and infuriating. Respectful to whom? The sister who never showed up, never called, never lifted a finger for me, yet expected the world to stop spinning whenever she had a project? But in that room, I was outnumbered. For sets of eyes, all turned against me, all convinced I was the villain in my own story. That's when I realized something. If I kept letting them twist the narrative, they would destroy me piece by piece. They had already taken my birthday. What would they take next? I sat down slowly, deliberately, and folded my hands. All right, I said quietly. Let's talk. I sat there, letting the silence stretch, while the 4 pairs of eyes drilled into me. Each of them was waiting for me to stumble, to apologize, to somehow acknowledge the crime of wanting to celebrate my own birthday. But I stayed quiet. I wanted them to squirm first, to feel the tension I had carried for decades. Dad cleared his throat. Adam, we're only trying to help you understand. Help me understand what? I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. That my existence needs to be approved by my sister? That my milestones are only valid if they don't inconvenience Lydia? Mom's face tightened. You're twisting everything. We're trying to show you how your actions affect others. Others? I repeated, leaning forward. So let me get this straight. I plan a simple dinner with a few friends. I invite you. I send invitations weeks in advance. And because my sister has an important event the next day, I've somehow wronged her? Wronged her in a way that justifies completely ignoring me? 24 calls, endless messages, now a formal family meeting? You call that showing concern? Lydia's lips pressed into a thin line. Adam, you don't get it. It's about appearances. People saw me at the networking meeting, and now, people saw you at your networking meeting, I said, holding back a sharp laugh. And that gives you the right to erase me from my own birthday? To make me feel invisible in front of my friends? Ezra chimed in, a smug grin on his face. It's not that serious. You're overreacting, Adam. You always overreact. I let their words wash over me for a moment, pretending to consider them. Inside, I was boiling, not just over the birthday, but decades of this pattern, of being minimized, ignored, sidelined, of being taught that my sister's needs and reputation mattered more than my feelings, my achievements, my life. And then, slowly, I smiled. Not a small, polite smile. A deliberate, cold smile. You know, I said, leaning back, you're right. I have overreacted. For years, I've let you all control the narrative. Let me guess, this is how it's always been for you, right? You get what you want, and anyone who dares step out of line gets reminded of their place. Mom's eyebrows shot up. Adam, no, I interrupted. Let me finish. I've spent my entire life playing by your rules. I've swallowed your favoritism, your manipulation, your endless comparisons between Lydia and me. And do you know what it got me? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So if you think this meeting, these lectures, are going to make me bend, you're mistaken. Lydia shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Adam, you're being dramatic. Am I? I asked, leaning forward now, voice low and controlled. Let's go over the facts, shall we? Birthday invitations sent weeks in advance. Ignored by my parents. Ignored by my sister. Ignored by my cousin. 24 missed calls from Mom. A formal meeting scheduled in your living room to lecture me about respect and appearances. And now you sit there, expecting me to apologize. Ezra laughed quietly, trying to dismiss it. Come on, Adam. You know this isn't fair to Lydia. Oh, it's not fair to Lydia? I said, and every word dripped with precision. Let me make sure I understand. You've all spent my entire life making sure she has the spotlight, that she gets the grades, the accolades, the praise, the attention. That if I try to carve out any space for myself, it becomes my fault that she feels uncomfortable. Is that correct? Mom's jaw tightened. Dad's hand pressed against the arm of his chair. They were trying to regain control, but I had already shifted the balance. Yes, I continued. That's exactly what you've done. And for decades, I've swallowed it. I've smiled, I've nodded, I've stayed in my corner because I didn't want the confrontation. But guess what? 40 years of waiting for your approval ends now. I'm done playing by your rules. There was a long silence. I could feel it. The room had gone still, except for Lydia, who was glaring at me as if I'd grown a second head. Ezra's smugness was slipping into confusion. Dad and Mom looked like statues, caught off guard by a son who finally spoke back. I paused, letting the tension settle. Then, almost casually, I reached for my phone on the side table and began scrolling. "You know what I've been doing these past few weeks?" I asked, my voice quiet, deliberate. "I've been documenting everything. Every conversation, every slight, every time I've been minimized, ignored, or manipulated by any of you. Emails, messages, voicemails, everything. And I've organized it all." Mom's face went pale. Dad's hand twitched. Lydia leaned forward, trying to mask her panic. Ezra straightened in his seat. I smiled again, watching them squirm. "And you know what I realized?" I continued. "I realized that I don't need your approval. I don't need your validation. But you've built a reputation in this family for being untouchable, for controlling everything, everyone, with your appearances and your petty rules. And now, it's time to turn that on its head." I didn't explain yet what I planned. I didn't need to. The silence that followed said more than words ever could. Each of them knew that the walls they had built around their power, their little kingdom of favoritism and manipulation, were suddenly exposed as fragile. Mom finally whispered, her voice tight. "Adam, what are you talking about?" I leaned back, taking my time. "I'm talking about showing the world exactly who you are. Not just at my birthday, not just with me, but everything. Every word you've twisted, every slight you've masked as concern. It's all documented." Lydia opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "Not yet, but it will come. And when it does, you'll see exactly how this looks from the outside. To everyone who has ever known us, you're the villains you've always been." Ezra scoffed, but it was weak. Dad's hand shook ever so slightly. Mom looked like she wanted to yell, to control, to manipulate, but the words wouldn't come. I smiled again, slow and deliberate. "You've controlled the narrative for decades. Now it's my turn to decide what story gets told." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. The fear in the room, the tightness in their jaws, the flush on their faces, the frantic glance exchanges between them, was intoxicating. After all these years of being powerless, of being ignored, I was finally holding the upper hand. I didn't move. I didn't have to. Just sitting there, calm and collected, I could feel the shift. The family I had grown up with, the ones who had made my life smaller, who had minimized me at every turn, were finally on the defensive. And I knew, without a doubt, that the next steps, the careful unraveling of their little world, would be delicious. But I didn't strike yet. Not fully. Not until I knew exactly how far I could push them. Because when you spend your whole life being sidelined, when you've watched your achievements dismissed and your milestones ignored, patience becomes the most powerful weapon of all. I leaned back, crossed my arms, and waited. And that's when Lydia spoke again, her voice low, sharp with panic. "Adam, what exactly are you planning?" I smiled, but didn't answer. Not yet. I didn't answer Lydia's question. Instead, I calmly stood up, collected my phone and my notes, and motioned for them all to follow me into the living room. The private meeting room my parents always used as a display of control, the one where they could lecture anyone into submission, was about to become my stage. I started with Mom. "Do you remember my last birthday, when you spent 20 minutes lecturing me for choosing a restaurant over Lydia's piano recital?" I held her gaze as she shifted uncomfortably. "Or the time you told me my awards were nice, but not worth celebrating?" She opened her mouth, but I raised a hand. "Don't interrupt. I have every message, every email, every call logged. Every instance you and Dad, Lydia, and Ezra minimized me, belittled me, or made me feel invisible. It's all here." I projected my screen onto the wall with a smart device I'd brought. Emails from Mom saying Lydia needed priority because she had a future to protect. Text messages from Dad dismissing my accomplishments as nothing special. And comments from Lydia comparing me to her at every turn, mocking my life choices and my work. Even Ezra's condescending remarks about my career and social life, all documented. I let them stare at the wall, frozen, as each item flashed across the screen. "You've all spent decades convincing me I was the problem," I said, my voice steady. "That my desires, my achievements, my milestones didn't matter. But look at this." I gestured to the scrolling messages. "You are the problem. You've built your little kingdom on favoritism and manipulation, and it's built on lies." Lydia gasped, covering her mouth. "Adam, that's private." You can't. Watch me, I said calmly. This isn't just private. This is proof of how you've treated me. And now, the world is going to see it too. I pulled up my social media account where I had created a private post for friends, family acquaintances, and former neighbors, people who had always witnessed their favoritism and manipulation firsthand. With the press of a button, I shared the screenshots, carefully edited to tell a clear story. My parents' favoritism toward Lydia, Lydia's manipulations and insults, and Ezra's snide, belittling behavior. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't need to. The truth was damning enough. Within minutes, notifications began flooding my phone. Messages poured in, friends expressing shock, distant relatives who had only heard my side quietly over the years reaching out to say they had suspected something similar, colleagues who knew my parents' public persona messaging me privately with stories of similar manipulations. I watched the fear ripple across the room. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. Dad's hand trembled slightly. Lydia's face turned pale, and Ezra's confident smirk faltered. They had always controlled the narrative. Now, it was theirs being controlled. You think this is going to ruin me? Dad finally said, his voice strained. Adam, this is your family. You're exaggerating. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm telling the truth. And this is the consequence of decades of minimizing me, of teaching me that my life didn't matter unless it aligned with yours. Every insult, every dismissal, every time you told me to support Lydia instead of living my own life, it all comes out today. Lydia finally spoke, her voice sharp, pleading now. Adam, please. You don't need to humiliate us like this. We can fix it. No, I said firmly. There's nothing to fix. The truth doesn't need fixing. Your actions speak for themselves. They sat in silence as I packed up my phone and notes. My friends, who had gathered quietly in the living room behind me, gave me supportive nods. Outside, the notifications kept coming, people discussing the post, sharing it with others who knew my family's reputation. I left that house feeling lighter than I had in decades. I didn't look back. They had finally lost the ability to control me, to twist reality, to dominate my life through their manipulation. In the days that followed, the fallout was immediate and public. Extended relatives and neighbors who had once looked to Mom and Dad as paragons of family virtue began distancing themselves. Lydia's network contacts, who had always admired her for her professional poise, started asking questions. Ezra found himself being called out by people who had once casually let his condescending remarks slide. Mom and Dad tried to reach me repeatedly, but I ignored every call. I didn't owe them explanations. Their actions had shown their true nature: controlling, manipulative, self-serving. The same family that had ignored my 40th birthday, dismissed my achievements, and constantly compared me to Lydia was now publicly revealed for what they were. As for Lydia and Ezra, their social circles started to shift subtly. Invitations stopped coming. Colleagues who once praised Lydia's accomplishments quietly distanced themselves. Ezra's charm, which had always been unchallenged within the family, now rang hollow to anyone who bothered to listen. And me? I finally celebrated. Alone if I wanted, or with the friends who actually cared for me. I didn't need validation from a family that had spent decades denying me any. I had taken control of my story, exposed the manipulators, and ensured that the power dynamics that had haunted me for years were finally reversed. The family? They retreated into their own world, frantic to salvage appearances, but the damage was done. Their villainy had been made public, their manipulation undeniable, and I, for the first time in 40 years, was free of their shadow. I didn't forgive them. I never will. And every time I see my phone light up with another person acknowledging what I'd endured, I know I made the right choice. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, it's simply taking back control, telling the truth, and watching the empire of lies crumble from within. And that's exactly what I did. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you like this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content like this.